think it's safe to say that something has awoken them.
No. Someone.
I am Grant from Screen Rant. Barry, it's great to meet you and to talk for Rings of Power Season 2. I have just loved this show since it started, and Season 2 just continues to be such a bold vision of Tolkien's work. How did it, as far as I could tell, you were not involved in Season 1, so how did it feel to come on board the team this season?
It was super exciting to get the call to join, I think we joined prior to the first season airing. We'd been slightly involved in Season 1 where we did some live casts, some head casts of some of the performers here in the UK, and we shipped them over to a Weta Workshop in New Zealand. So we were slightly privy to who some of the cast were, but we weren't involved really at all in Season 1. But we were aware of potentially what the scale could be of this show. As we started getting introduced to the scripts, the story arc, we were fed the snippets from us and about what Season 1 entailed. And slowly during that pre-production, my wife Sarah and I, we ran our company together. We started to be more and more aware of how huge this show was. And it was interesting because we actually thought, coming from with a background of doing things like Game of Thrones and The Last of Us, we had season of The Last of Us, which was a huge prosthetics number as well. We thought we were pretty au fait with numbers and scale, but I don't think anything could have prepared us for what we were about to go into with Season 2 of The Rings of Power. So we're usually involved with projects where we will have key characters which would play for a number of days. We might do guest appearances on set, and we'd shoot with one or two characters here and there. And something like Thrones years ago, we would start off with various characters throughout the shoot, and towards the tail end we would end on this huge climax and huge battle sequence where that's where we would be putting all our effort into. Rings of Power, our first week on set, we had 60 performers in full prosthetic makeup, and that was unprecedented for us. It was in at the deep end straight away. So, an incredible challenge, but so rewarding at the end of it.
I love how much Prime Video is just backing the sheer scale of this show. It really does feel like a movie more than just a TV show, but obviously on a longer level, which I love. And so I did also want to ask then, in coming on board this show, obviously, like you said, you and Sarah were getting ideas of what Season 1 was going to entail, but what was it like coming on to the prosthetics in particular and making your stamp on them while still adhering to what the team on Season 1 had done?
That's a really good question. I think always for a new team and a new production base joining a show that's already established, it's a fine line between, obviously, from our point of view, we would be very interested in putting our own stamp on it. It's something we would want to do, something quite fresh, but you have to adhere to the laws and the continuity from Season 1 and make sure that there is a continuity that's already been established. Luckily for us, we have a very good relationship with Weta Workshop. I worked for them several years ago on a couple of projects, and I know a lot of the guys there. I know Richard Taylor quite well, and a lot of the artists I'm friends with. So I think the great thing for us was we were inheriting all this information and all this imagery and footage from Season 1 that we could use as a template and a springboard for what we were going to continue to do in Season 2. But the showrunners, JD and Patrick, were very keen for us to put our own mark on it as well. So we couldn't go completely left field and do something completely off from what was already established. But we work very closely with the visual effects supervisor, Jason Smith, who's a big advocate and big fan of practical effects. He wanted as much as possible in camera, which was great news for us. But he would tell us a lot of the scenarios from Season 1 where there would be several hero orc makeups, for example, with people in bespoke silicone makeups. And then the majority of characters which were mid to background would be pull over the head silicone masks. And he was quite keen to see if we could extend on that and create many more mid to hero makeups that be shot full up close. So we started devising a technique which is similar to what we've done before for big crowd days, where we sculpted about 10, 15, 20 different orcs, different shapes and sizes over different human head casts. And we split all the makeups up into like a jigsaw puzzle of pieces, but they all had foreheads, face with nose, chin, a balaclava with ears. And we were able to take a forehead from him and a nose from him and cheeks from him and construct all like a plethora of different makeups, but they would all be foam latex rubber appliances that we could glue with medical adhesive onto people's faces. They all had bespoke contact lenses, bespoke dentures, but on any day they could throw any different amount of extras or supporting artists or stuntmen at us, and we could give them 20, 40, 60 makeups any one time. So it was giving the directors more freedom in season 2 as to, yes, they had characters like Gloog, which is Adar's sort of henchman, played by Robert Strange, played Gloog, and he has an awful lot of dialogue in this season. But they were also able to bring a lot of these other characters right up close and shoot them drooling and growling in front of them and be able to just pan across and have these glorious close-ups. And you'd still have characters behind them, 2, 3, 4 guys back who were in these sort of beautiful makeups. But it just gave them the opportunity to get a lot more sort of bang for their buck and be able to shoot these characters and get a lot more detail on them. So for us, that was probably one of the biggest challenges, was hitting those numbers and scale and to keep that constant throughout the season. On top of all these other races that we had our elves and our dwarfs and our half-futs and our Barrow-wights, and so it was fascinating working on a production where every single day of the shoot we had somebody in some form of prosthetics, and we've never worked on a show where we had 2 main prosthetic buses on different units, and we usually had 6 to 8 principal cast in some form of prosthetics every single day. So it's been unprecedented for us, really.
That's incredible, and I do love that attention was paid to the orcs, since we do see a lot more of the orc this season. And I'm actually then curious to hear, which scene really required the most for them in particular, because there's obviously the opening scene with Sauron's initial defeat where there's that huge horde of them, but then trying to avoid spoilers, there's something big that comes up in the final couple of episodes that involves a lot of them. So which scene would you say involved more from your side?
I think hero makeups, possibly that coronation at the start with Sauron. That was our first couple of weeks on set, and as I say, I think we had 60 performers in makeups, and they were in the same sort of makeup over 5 to 10 days, and they kind of just rotated them and brought more front and central. We also had guys in pull-on silicone masks as well. In a way, that was a really good testing ground to see what we could achieve in a certain amount of time. And then with the sequences coming in the further episodes, being able to plan and schedule quite well. We knew when we were getting to later episodes with, like, obviously, as you mentioned, without spoilers, huge sequences, that we knew that we would be getting into mass numbers of characters, 100, 150, 200 plus or whatever, which, a great number might be VFX, and we may have shot plates with various amounts of characters, which Jason and the team could duplicate. But on any given day, we averaged about between 20 to 40 people in prosthetic makeup, about 70 guys with pullover masks. And then we had these deep background guys, which had what we call party masks. And they were like these kind of almost like plastic masks, but they could be very deep, 100 feet away. And they kind of look like orcs, So at any given day, we could generate a huge number of character to be there present on screen. And then at the same time, we were filming sequences with elves, sequences with dwarves, sequences with Harfoots in the, I think it was the Gran Canaria Islands at the time. So it was, scale was the challenge, really. But I think it was in a sadistic, strange way. It was really good being thrown at the deep end right at the start of the shoot, so we could then preempt how are we going to make these numbers up for these bigger, greater scenes.
Well, you certainly pulled it off. So kudos to you, Sarah, and everybody else, because it all looks incredible. And you mentioned the Barrow Wights a minute ago, and I did want to ask about them because they are such a haunting design. You obviously are no stranger to creating haunting designs, whether it's Last of Us or Stranger Things as Vecna. But I'm curious, this is the first time we've seen them in the show, and I love how they do feel both practical and not very CGI, but have a layer of VFX to them. What was it like designing them, especially for that fight sequence?
It was a really fun process, actually. It's something originally when we read the script, we thought these are going to be great characters to work on. And then as we had our meetings, it was, it was being battered across the table, and it sounded like it would be predominantly visual effects, and whether we may not even provide anything at all. And then Jason Smith from VFX came to us and said, really, we could do with as much in camera as possible, and we should design these guys together. And they had loose sketches, some concept art originally, which they'd pitched to JD and Patrick, the showrunners. But Jason was like, we should work on these together. He said, I'm not going to lie, they may end up being predominantly visual effects and digital, but I want practical presence, and we want a performance that we can use on the evening as well. So we both did concept art, and we worked on images for a few weeks together, and then we sculpted and did a makeup test on one of the performers, and they were able to shoot a little bit of that and start to figure out the sequence itself. And we ended up doing 4 prosthetic makeups, head and shoulders, arms, some chest pieces for 5 characters in the end. And we shot southwest of London in a forest over a series of about 2 weeks, night shoots. And they had these incredible mechanisms that are built. I think that they coined one the seesaw, and it was this huge platform that a performer could be on, and they'd wave him up and down and in and out in front of camera. And it was incredibly fluid. And to see, one of which was Robert Strange, and to see him doing these movements, it was like, it looked like CGI in a way. But they were able to take the performances. They shot some performance against green screen as well, and then they layered with visual effects over the top. They removed the performers' bodies from below the waist and had that lovely kind of stringy, sinewy costume and chains, and they created negative space, sort of holes through the performers as well. And it wasn't until I watched the episode a few weeks ago, I was thinking, I imagine there'll be predominantly CGI, but I could see the makeups and see the performances in there as well. So it was, it's a great example of that perfect marriage between practical and digital, I think. So the whole season's just been a joy to work with visual effects, actually. So it's one great umbrella. So it's been a fantastic opportunity.
I'm glad you've had such a dream collaborative experience on that. And yeah, the Barrow Wights do feel like the perfect mix of the two different sides of effects. So they're lovely. And so you mentioned the elves, and I did want to ask, because one of the big elves we meet this season is obviously Anatar, Sauron's elven form. And I'd love to hear about designing that, though, because obviously Charlie is still playing that role, but yet he looks, not only very different from Halbrand, but also just very unlike Charlie in a way. And so I'd love to hear about, crafting that look in order to really exemplify this power of a man who is posing as a god, essentially, to Celebrimbor.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It's transforming Charlie into another being which looks almost perfect in a way, and his elven form. We worked very closely with makeup and hair designers Chrissy Blundell and Flora Moody, and it was developing. Down to his anatomy of his ears. we're the challenge for us is we always have the canvas beneath whatever we're doing with prosthetics. So we are dictated primarily to giving somebody elf ears that would suit them, but we're covering their own ears basically, or extending. Fortunately, Charlie has very nice ears, so we were able to give him these beautiful, slightly upturned, angular ears, which are we're looking at all the anatomy of the ear, the elven ears that have been created in the past, but it's creating something which would work well with his facial makeup, complement the hairstyle as well. It's like he has that slight peak, widow's peak, and the costume piece he has in his hair as well. It's having lots of elements that need to work together, and any one of those things could throw everything else off. And it's even down to Charlie's complexion as well, and the foundation that's used on his face that has a slight sheer to it as well. It's creating this kind of otherworldly, godly presence that in a way, he's quite separate to the other elves that we've created. We know it's Sauron at heart, but we need to create something that almost looks perfect and beautiful. So I wouldn't necessarily say he was a challenge. He was a really interesting character to develop, because we have somebody like Anatar, and then we have somebody like Sam Hazeldene's character Adar, who, even though Sam was inheriting that role from Joseph Moore from season 1, but we had to create Sam's Adar to again have enough continuity from season 1, but he's in theory an evil elven, sort of part orc, part elven character. So you have the two ends of the spectrum, really. So it's creating shapes for Sam which aren't necessarily grotesque, but they're different in design to what we put on Charlie. So it's trying to tick all the boxes from beauty to grotesque, somewhere in between. But Charlie was a dream to put his ears on, as were all the cast. We've never been blessed with such a beautiful cast before. So all these young cast are just really lovely human beings who were just really into it and really enthused and really excited to have rubber stuck on the face. So we've never had that before. So it's just been a truly wonderful experience.
I love hearing that. I mean, that's something that can be uncomfortable, but for some actors, but I love hearing that everybody was just game to dive right in. I see I'm almost out of time, so I did want to ask really quickly as well. I mentioned it a moment ago, but Stranger Things is Vecna. Terrifying design. We're coming up on the final season. He's expected to come back. Are you involved with bringing him back? And if so, what can you tease about how different he may be or look this season in comparison to last?
We are involved and have been involved. It's a very long shoot, I can say that. And I can't really say anything about obviously his design or the look of Vecna. All I can say is that it's a joy to come back. I mean, it's only the second time we've worked on Stranger Things. We started on season 4, but we're huge fans of the Duffer Brothers. We're huge fans of the cast as well, and crew on Stranger Things. But Jamie Campbell Bower, as always, is just a delight to work with. So it's been lovely that we're returning to a character that we spent many hours working with Jamie on season 4, and it just never gets tired. It never gets tired. So I mean, all I can say is, without giving any spoilers away, is it's an incredible story. It's an incredible season. So it's the Duffers, I think, are definitely going to give what the fans are after, I think. So it's going to be exciting. Really exciting.
Well, I don't want to get you in trouble, so I won't pry, but I appreciate you taking the time to not only talk about that, but Rings of Power Season 2. Again, you and everybody have done an incredible job. I look forward to seeing what comes in the finale. It's the only thing I haven't seen yet, and keeping the word alive. So thank you very so much for taking the time. I greatly appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks a lot, Grant.
Absolutely. Have a good rest of your week.
Thank you.
You seemed intent on finding Sauron. One might even say consumed by it.